Welcome to my channel. Have you ever heard of a queen who faced off against mighty empires and never backed down? A woman who used her voice, her mind, and her sword to protect her people? Today we're going to explore the true story of Nzinga, the fearless queen from Africa who became a powerful symbol of resistance and strength. Her life was full of battles, bold decisions, and brilliant strategies. Stay with me until the end. You won't believe just how powerful and clever she truly was. Chapter 1. A young girl in a dangerous world. Long before she became a warrior queen, Nzinga was just a young girl growing up in the powerful kingdom of Ndongo, in what is now modern-day Angola. Her father was King Kiluanji, a strong and respected ruler. But even though Nzinga was not the heir to the throne, she was different from other girls in the royal family. While many girls were taught only how to behave at court or marry into other powerful families, Nzinga learned much more. She listened carefully to political meetings, studied languages like Portuguese, and trained with weapons. Her father noticed her intelligence and strength, and he allowed her to be part of important discussions. From a young age, Nzinga was preparing for something much greater than anyone expected. But the world around Nzinga was changing. This was the early 1600s, and Portuguese colonizers had already started arriving in Africa. They were not just trading goods, they were also capturing and enslaving African people, including many from Nzinga's land. The Portuguese wanted more control, more power, and more people to enslave. They began making deals with local African leaders, some of whom agreed, and others who fought back. Nzinga's father was one of the leaders who refused to give up his land or his people easily. He tried to fight, but the Portuguese were strong and well-armed. They used lies, pressure, and violence to get what they wanted. Nzinga saw all of this with her own eyes. She saw her people being taken away in chains. She saw villages burned and families destroyed. She saw fear spreading through the kingdom. These early experiences shaped her deeply. She learned that the world could be cruel, but she also learned that smart, brave people could still stand up and fight back. When Nzinga's father died, her brother Mbandi became king. But Mbandi was not like Nzinga. He was nervous, angry, and not a strong leader. He trusted the wrong people, and he feared the Portuguese. He even allowed them to build forts and take land without much resistance. The people of Ndongo started to lose hope, but there was one person they had not forgotten: Nzinga. Even though she was not queen yet, she was already known for her intelligence, strength, and courage. In 1622, something incredible happened. Mbandi was desperate. The Portuguese were getting stronger, and he didn't know what to do. So he sent Nzinga, his sister, to speak with the Portuguese governor in Luanda. This was a dangerous mission. The Portuguese did not respect women as equals, and they certainly didn't expect to be challenged by one. But Nzinga surprised them all. She arrived dressed in fine clothing, confident and calm. When she entered the meeting room, the governor offered chairs to everyone, except her. He wanted to show that she was beneath him. But Nzinga didn't get angry. Instead, she calmly turned to one of her servants and had him kneel on the ground. She sat on his back like a throne. She made it clear. She was not less than anyone. She was a leader, a diplomat, and a queen in her own right. That moment became legendary. Even today, it's remembered as a symbol of power, pride, and resistance. But Nzinga didn't stop there. She negotiated directly with the Portuguese, using her knowledge of their language and culture to win a temporary peace for her people. She was only in her 30s, but she had already shown that she could face great danger and still come out stronger. Back in Ndongo, Nzinga's mission was celebrated, but not everyone was happy. Her brother Mbandi felt threatened by her growing popularity. Some say he began to fear that she would take his place. Tensions grew within the royal family. Then, suddenly, Mbandi died. Some say it was suicide. Others believe he was poisoned, possibly by Nzinga herself. The truth is still unclear, but what we do know is that after his death, Nzinga became queen. This was not an easy path. Many men in her court refused to follow her. They said a woman could not rule. They said she was too bold, too strong, too different. But Nzinga was not afraid. She had watched her people suffer. She had seen what weak leaders allowed. And she had already proven that she could lead, speak, and fight. Now, as queen, she would begin a new chapter, not just for herself, but for all of Ndongo. Chapter 2. The Queen Who Sat Like a King. Nzinga was now queen, but being crowned didn't mean peace. In fact, her real fight had just begun. Many people inside her kingdom still believed that a woman should not rule. Some nobles tried to take power from her. Others tried to form secret deals with the Portuguese. But Nzinga was not going to let anyone control her. She had learned from watching the failures of her brother, and she was ready to do whatever it took to protect her people and defend her land. Nzinga didn't rule like most women of her time. In fact, she didn't even rule like most men. She dressed in full warrior clothes, like a king. She wore armor, carried weapons, and trained with soldiers. She held war councils, made speeches, and rode into battle on horseback. She didn't want people to see her as just a queen. She wanted to be seen as a true ruler, with the strength of a king and the wisdom of a leader. That's why many people began calling her Queen King Nzinga. One of the most powerful stories from this time is about how Nzinga demanded respect from the Portuguese in her own powerful way. During another important meeting with a Portuguese governor, she noticed that he again refused to offer her a seat. The message was clear. They didn't see her as an equal. But Nzinga didn't get angry or complain. Instead, she gave the same powerful response as before. She calmly ordered one of her guards to kneel, and she sat on his back, tall and proud. That image, the queen sitting high above the men who tried to disrespect her, became a symbol for generations. It showed the world that she would not be pushed down by anyone. But Nzinga's challenges were not just about chairs and meetings. After her brother's death, the Portuguese tried to take more land. They broke their deals, attacked villages, and tried to make Nzinga look weak. They thought she would surrender, but she didn't. Instead, she formed alliances with nearby African kingdoms. She began building her own powerful army. She trained her soldiers in new ways and taught them how to fight against Portuguese guns and horses. She even began to welcome escaped slaves into her army, giving them freedom and purpose. Her forces were growing stronger, but so was the enemy. The Portuguese were not the only threat. Many other African leaders were also working with the colonizers to keep their own power. Nzinga had to fight not just one enemy, but many. She used clever tricks and strong diplomacy. She sent spies to gather information. She made alliances with some European traders, including the Dutch, who were also fighting against Portugal in the region. She played her enemies against each other like a master chess player. One of the most amazing parts of her rule was how she used both diplomacy and war to survive. Sometimes she spoke peacefully, offering deals and promising cooperation. Other times, she attacked with full force, surprising her enemies with clever moves. She was always thinking ahead, always planning her next step. During this time, Nzinga also made a bold personal choice. In order to make sure no man could challenge her rule, she declared that she would never marry. Instead, she created a circle of male wives, young men who dressed as women and followed her orders. It was shocking to many, but it was Nzinga's way of staying in full control. She changed the rules. She made her own traditions. She proved that leadership was not about gender. It was about strength, vision, and courage. But even with all her power and cleverness, Nzinga knew she couldn't win with just battles. Her kingdom was still under pressure. The Portuguese had more weapons, more money, and more soldiers. Her own people were tired from years of war. Some began to lose faith. But Nzinga refused to quit. Instead, she made a huge decision. When her capital city was attacked and taken by the Portuguese, she didn't surrender. She disappeared into the mountains. From there, she would begin a new kind of war, a war of survival, a war of strategy, a war that would last for 30 years. This moment, when Nzinga escaped to the mountains and began leading her people in secret, marked a turning point in her life. She was no longer just a queen on a throne. She became a freedom fighter, a resistance leader, and a living legend. From deep in the forest, she led surprise attacks, protected her people, and built a new way of living away from the enemy's control. Her enemies thought they had defeated her, but they were wrong. Nzinga was just getting started. Chapter 3. Queen of the Mountains. After losing her capital city to the Portuguese, Nzinga could have surrendered. Many other leaders did. But Nzinga chose a different path. She gathered her people, those still loyal to her, and led them deep into the forests and mountains of Angola. There she created a hidden base and built a new kind of kingdom, one that the Portuguese couldn't easily find or control. This was the beginning of a powerful and inspiring chapter in her life. 30 years of resistance, war, and survival. Nzinga had become not just a queen, but a leader of rebels, a warrior in the shadows, and a living symbol of freedom. Life in the mountains was hard. There were no palaces, no gold, no soft beds. But Nzinga didn't care. She lived like a soldier, eating what her people ate, marching beside them, sharing the danger. Her army was made up of freed slaves, former enemies, and loyal warriors. Some were women, some were men, and many had nothing left to lose. But under Nzinga's command, they became one of the most feared fighting forces in Africa. Nzinga used guerrilla warfare, a smart and powerful way of fighting when your army is smaller than your enemies. She and her fighters would sneak into Portuguese camps at night, destroy supplies, and disappear before the enemy could catch them. They used the forests and rivers as their allies. They struck quickly and vanished like smoke. For the Portuguese, it was frustrating and frightening. For Nzinga's people, it was hope. One of the most powerful moments during this time was when Nzinga stood in front of her army, holding a spear in one hand and raising her other hand high in the air. She spoke to her warriors, not as a queen above them, but as a leader beside them. She said, "If we must die, let it be with pride. If we must fight, let it be with fire in our hearts. Our land is our life, and we will never give it up." Her words gave strength to the tired, courage to the weak, and unity to her scattered people. But Nzinga wasn't just a fighter. She was still a clever political leader. From her mountain base, she made contact with the Dutch, who were at war with the Portuguese in the region. She offered them support in exchange for weapons and military help. This was another brilliant move. Nzinga was using the same European powers who once tried to destroy her to now fight on her side. Her resistance lasted for decades. Think about that. 30 years of constant fighting, hiding, leading, and surviving. Most leaders don't even last 10 years on a throne. But Nzinga, without a throne or a palace, managed to stay strong and protect her people for 3 whole decades. During this time, her legend only grew. People across Africa heard stories of the queen who refused to give up. Some said she was protected by spirits. Others said she could not be killed. But the truth was even more powerful. Nzinga was brave, smart, and determined, and that made her stronger than any army. But with time, things started to change. Nzinga was getting older. Her people were growing tired, and the Portuguese were not going away. She began to realize that if she continued to fight forever, her people might not survive. So once again, Nzinga showed her wisdom. She began thinking about peace, but only if it meant protecting her people's freedom. Even as she planned for peace, she kept her army strong and her enemies guessing. She sent letters, held meetings, and slowly began to build trust with the Portuguese again. But this time, she was in control. She didn't come begging. She came as a leader who had never been defeated. And slowly, step by step, she moved her people out of the forests and back into the cities. It wasn't surrender. It was a smart, careful return to power. Nzinga's time in the mountains proved something very important. Leadership is not about where you live or what you wear. It's not about castles or crowns. It's about courage, sacrifice, and never giving up. Nzinga led from the front. She fought beside her people. And she became a queen not because of her bloodline, but because of her strength. By the time she began negotiating peace, Nzinga had already won in many ways. She had inspired generations. She had changed the way people thought about women in power. And she had shown the world that even the strongest empire could not break the will of a determined leader. But her story isn't over yet. In the final chapter, we'll see how Nzinga spent her last years, not as a warrior in the forest, but as a respected ruler, a wise elder, and a powerful symbol for future generations. Chapter 4. The legacy lives on. Nzinga was now in the final chapter of her life. But even as her hair turned gray and her body grew older, her mind stayed sharp and her spirit unbreakable. After more than 30 years of fighting from the forests and mountains, she had achieved what once seemed impossible, a peace agreement with the Portuguese, but on terms that gave her people dignity, land, and protection. She had not begged. She had not surrendered. She had negotiated from a position of strength after proving for decades that she could not be defeated by force. Nzinga returned from the mountains not as a queen in hiding, but as a respected ruler. The Portuguese had learned to fear her, and now they began to respect her. She rebuilt her capital and helped her people return to their homes. Many of them had never known peace before. They had grown up during war, following Nzinga through jungles and battlefields. Now they saw her working to build schools, rebuild homes, and bring stability to her land. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She became a wise, peaceful ruler, guiding her people into a new future. One of the most moving moments from this time was when Nzinga stood before her people, not in armor, but in royal robes, and declared, "We are still standing, we are still strong, and no one will ever erase us from this land." Her voice was steady, her eyes calm. For many, it was the first time they saw their queen without a sword, and yet she seemed more powerful than ever. It was not the power of fear or force. It was the power of legacy. But even in peace, Nzinga continued to be careful. She knew the Portuguese could not fully be trusted. They still wanted control, still took slaves from nearby regions, and still tried to influence African politics. Nzinga tried to protect as many people as she could. She built strong borders, strengthened local leadership, and worked hard to stop the slave trade in her own territory. It wasn't easy. It was a constant struggle. But Nzinga never stopped trying. She also began to think about what would happen after her death. She had no children of her own, so she worked to train and guide young leaders who could carry on her legacy. She taught them not just how to rule, but how to survive, how to lead with strength, and how to protect their people without losing their honor. Nzinga lived to be in her 80s, a miracle in a time of war and hardship. She had outlived her enemies, outlasted empires, and outsmarted anyone who tried to defeat her. When she died in 1663, there was no great war or final battle. She died peacefully in her own kingdom, surrounded by her people. But her death did not end her story. Her name lived on, passed down in songs, stories, and legends. In Angola, she became a national hero. Across Africa, she became a symbol of Black power and pride. Even in the Americas, enslaved Africans whispered her name, remembering a queen who never bowed down. During the 20th century, her legacy inspired freedom fighters, civil rights leaders, and Black women who wanted to reclaim their strength in history. Today, Nzinga is more than just a historical figure. She's a reminder that a woman can lead armies, rule kingdoms, and fight for justice, even in the face of impossible odds. She proved that true power doesn't come from titles or crowns. It comes from courage, wisdom, and the refusal to give up. And for English learners, her story is also a reminder that language is powerful. Nzinga used words just as strongly as she used weapons. She negotiated, inspired, and led with her voice. She learned Portuguese so she could speak to her enemies directly. She trained herself to think clearly, speak wisely, and never let others speak over her. That's something we can all learn from. Using our voice to stand strong no matter where we come from. So as we end this story, think about what Nzinga taught us. She showed us that leadership is not about being born into power. It's about rising up when the world tries to push you down. She taught us to be brave, to be clever, and to never forget who we are. Nzinga's story is not just history, it is inspiration. If you enjoyed this story of Queen Nzinga, a real-life warrior who defied empires and led her people with courage, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. Would you like to learn about more powerful women from history? Or do you have a hero you'd like me to talk about next? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and remember, learning history in English can be exciting, powerful, and fun. See you next time.